I never imagined my own mother would orchestrate the theft of my happiness, or that years later, they would all stare in disbelief when they discovered exactly who I had become and who I had married. My world shattered the day I overheard her poisonous words. "She's just holding you back, Jason. Natalie has real ambition. You deserve someone who will elevate you, not an artist who can barely pay her bills." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Chen, and until that moment outside my parents' study, I thought I understood my place in the world. I was 26, living in Seattle, working as a digital artist for a small design studio while building my portfolio of original artwork on the side. My apartment was modest but filled with color. Paintings leaning against every wall, sketches pinned to corkboards, and my drawing tablet always open on the desk by the window that overlooked the city skyline. Jason and I had been together for 4 years after meeting in our final year of college. He was handsome in that clean-cut, approachable way, warm brown eyes, neatly trimmed hair, and a smile that had initially made me drop my coffee when he first introduced himself at the campus. Café. Now he was working at a promising tech startup, developing apps that helped small businesses compete with larger corporations. We had been talking about moving in together, maybe even getting engaged soon. "We make a good team," he would often say, kissing my forehead while I showed him my latest designs. "Your creativity and my practicality, we balance each other." I believed him. I thought we were solid. My relationship with my family had always been complicated. My mother, Catherine Chen, was the CEO of a successful real estate development company, a position that demanded perfection in all aspects of her life, including her daughters. Our family home in the exclusive Bellevue neighborhood overlooked Lake Washington, all sleek lines, glass, and minimalist furniture that never seemed lived in. Much like my mother herself. My older sister Natalie had followed in her footsteps, getting her MBA and joining the family business with ruthless efficiency. At 29, she was already overseeing major development projects and being featured in business magazines as a rising star to watch. She was everything I wasn't: pragmatic, ambitious, and always impeccably dressed in designer suits that cost more than 3 months of my rent. I was the disappointment, the artistic daughter who chose creativity over corporate ambition. My mother's friends would ask about me at their charity galas and business functions, and I could see the momentary tightening around her eyes before she would respond. "Olivia is exploring her artistic interests," she would say, as if my career was a phase I would eventually outgrow. "At least she's dating someone with potential," she would add, as if Jason was my only redeeming quality. That Sunday dinner at my parents' home had seemed ordinary enough. My mother had insisted Jason and I attend, along with Natalie, who was between relationships after a messy breakup with a hedge fund manager. The modern dining room echoed with the clinking of expensive silverware against imported china, as my father, a quiet man who had long ago surrendered to my mother's domineering personality, methodically cut his meat into perfect squares. "The Robinson property closed today," Natalie announced, accepting a glass of wine from our housekeeper. $2 million over asking price." "That's my girl," my mother beamed, reaching over to squeeze Natalie's hand. Always exceeding expectations. Her eyes drifted to me. "And how is the drawing going, Olivia?" "It's digital design, Mom," I corrected for what felt like the 1,000th time. "And it's going well. The studio has been commissioned to redesign the visual identity for that new sustainable clothing brand. You know, the one that uses recycled materials." My mother replied, clearly unimpressed. "Is there much money in that sort of thing?" Before I could answer, she turned to Jason. "Jason, you should stop by the office sometime. We could use someone with your technical background to consult on our new property management platform. The team we've hired is adequate, but I'd value your insight." Jason straightened in his chair, clearly flattered. "I'd be happy to take a look, Mrs. Chen. That's actually similar to what we're developing at Nexus right now. Wonderful. Perhaps you could come by tomorrow afternoon? Natalie will be leading the meeting. I'm sure she'd appreciate having someone who speaks her language. I thought nothing of it at the time, just my mother's usual networking. Jason seemed pleased by the invitation, and I was happy to see him accepted by my family, even if I never quite measured up. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. The house was too large for a family of 4, with hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly. As I made my way back downstairs, I heard voices coming from my father's study. The door left slightly, ajar, a strip of warm light spilling into the darkened hallway. "She's just holding you back, Jason." My mother's voice was clear, unmistakable. "Natalie has real ambition. You deserve someone who will elevate you, not an artist who can barely pay her bills." I froze, my hand gripping the smooth wooden banister so tightly my knuckles turned white. This couldn't be happening. My own mother was trying to— What? Set Jason up with my sister? I held my breath, waiting for Jason to defend me, to laugh it off, to express outrage at the suggestion. His response shattered my world. "I care about Olivia, Mrs. Chen. We've been together a long time." His voice trailed off, uncertain, lacking the immediate rejection such a proposition deserved. "And what do you have to show for it?" My mother's tone was dismissive. "Natalie's already expressed interest in you, and think of the opportunities. You could be part of something significant instead of supporting a hobby that masquerades as a career." The pause that followed was deafening. I waited for Jason's defense of our relationship, of my work, of our future together. Each second of silence felt like a betrayal. "I don't know," he finally said. "It would feel wrong to just think about it," my mother continued smoothly. "Natalie understands the business world like you do. You speak the same language. Olivia will always be— Well, Olivia—" The contempt in her voice when she said my name made my stomach turn, but nothing prepared me for what came next. "She's downstairs in accounting going over some projections," my mother added. "Why don't you go find her? She could use your expertise on a few things." I backed away from the door, heart pounding, and slipped into the nearby powder room. The pristine white marble countertop blurred as tears filled my eyes. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to process what I'd just heard. My own mother was trying to orchestrate my breakup, pushing my boyfriend toward my sister, all because she thought I wasn't good enough. I stared at my reflection, eyes wide with betrayal, cheeks flushed with humiliation. In that moment, I understood that in my mother's world, I would never be enough just as I was. And Jason, the man I thought would stand by me, had hesitated. He hadn't immediately rejected the idea. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I carefully reapplied my mascara, painted on a smile, and returned to the living room where my father was watching a basketball game. Jason was nowhere to be seen. Neither was Natalie. "Where's Jason?" I asked as casually as I could manage. "I think he went downstairs with your sister," my father replied, eyes never leaving the screen. "Your mother asked him to look at something, for the business." I nodded and sat down, pretending to watch the game while my mind raced and my heart broke. Something had shifted, and nothing would be the same again. I should have confronted them immediately. Should have stormed downstairs, demanded answers, drawn boundaries that couldn't be crossed. Instead, I sat beside my father, pretending to care about basketball statistics while my mind raced through every interaction between Jason and my sister over the past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. Had there been lingering glances? Secret text messages? Was I paranoid? Or had Natalie started wearing more makeup around Jason, showing up to family dinners in increasingly form-fitting dresses? I thought back to the way she'd touch his arm when laughing at his jokes, how she'd ask detailed questions about his work, attention I had attributed to simple politeness. When Jason and Natalie finally returned upstairs 45 minutes later, I studied their faces for clues. Jason's cheeks were slightly flushed, and Natalie had the satisfied look of a cat who'd discovered an unattended bowl of cream. "Sorry that took so long," Jason said, slipping his arm around my waist. "The system they're implementing is actually pretty fascinating, isn't it?" Natalie smiled, tucking a strand of perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear. "Jason has such insight. Mom was right about consulting him." The drive home that night was quieter than usual. Jason talked about the property management platform, how innovative it was, how impressed he was with the Chen company's forward thinking. "Your sister really knows her stuff," he added, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I didn't realize she had such a strong technical background." "She doesn't," I replied, staring out the passenger window at the Seattle skyline. "She has an MBA, not a computer science degree." Jason shrugged. "Well, she's picked up a lot. Very quick learner." I wanted to ask him about his conversation with my mother, to demand he tell me what had been said. But a cold fear gripped me. What if confronting him pushed him directly toward Natalie? What if my suspicions were wrong, and I came across as insecure and jealous? So I said nothing, and that was my second mistake. The changes were subtle at first. Jason began mentioning Natalie in casual conversation, how efficiently she ran meetings, how impressed potential investors were with her presentations, how her fitness regimen was really showing results. "Did you know she does Olympic weightlifting? She invited me to try her gym sometime." "How would I know that?" I asked, not looking up from my tablet where I was finalizing designs for a client. "And why would you go to her gym?" "Just being friendly," he replied defensively. "She's your sister, Liv. It would be weird if we didn't get along." 3 weeks after that Sunday dinner, Jason canceled our weekend trip to Vancouver, a trip we'd been planning for months to celebrate our anniversary. "I'm really sorry, but this project deadline got moved up," he explained, the call breaking up slightly as he spoke from his office. "The whole team is working through the weekend." I tried to get out of it, but I swallowed my disappointment. "It's fine. We can reschedule." That same weekend, my mother posted photos on Instagram from a charity gala. In the background of one image, barely noticeable unless you were looking carefully, were Jason and Natalie, standing close together by the bar, laughing. I called him immediately, my hands shaking. "The charity gala? Yeah, your mom invited me last minute," he explained with infuriating casualness. "The company bought a table and they had an extra seat since someone canceled. She thought it would be good networking." "You told me you were working," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was. All day. The gala was just for a couple of hours in the evening. It wasn't a big deal, Liv." "My mother invited you? Or Natalie?" A pause. "Your mom, I think. Does it matter?" It mattered. It mattered very much. The late nights at work increased. The texts I sent often went unanswered for hours. When we were together, his phone would ping constantly, and he'd smile at the screen before typing quick responses. "Work stuff," he'd say if I asked, but he'd turn the phone face down afterward. I began dreading family gatherings, watching their interactions with wounded eyes while they exchanged private smiles across the table. My father remained oblivious, buried in his newspaper or distracted by sports on TV. My mother, however, watched the unfolding drama she'd orchestrated with barely concealed satisfaction. "Natalie tells me Jason's been so helpful with the new platform," she mentioned during a rare mother-daughter lunch she'd insisted upon. "Such a bright young man. I always thought he'd go far with the right guidance." I pushed my salad around the plate, appetite gone. "He's always been bright. That's why he's leading development at Nexus." Yes," she replied, sipping her sparkling water. "But Nexus is still a startup, isn't it? So much uncertainty in that world. The Chen Group offers real stability, real growth potential." The implication was clear. Natalie could offer Jason more than I could. More connections, more opportunities, more status. In my mother's eyes, love was secondary to advancement. My closest friend Zoe noticed the changes in my relationship before I was willing to admit them to myself. We were having coffee at our favorite spot overlooking Pike Place Market when she finally said what I'd been afraid to acknowledge. "Something's off with Jason," she observed, studying my face carefully. "He canceled on dinner with Ryan and me last week, and then Ryan saw him at that new rooftop bar downtown." "He was probably with work people," I said automatically. Zoe hesitated. "He was with a woman, Liv. Tall, designer clothes, looked like she was headed for a photo shoot." My stomach clenched. "Did Ryan say anything to him?" "He tried, but they left before he could make his way over." Zoe reached across the table to squeeze my hand. It might be nothing. Maybe it was a client. But we both knew better. I tried to talk to Jason that night, to voice my concerns about the distance growing between us. He dismissed my worries with practiced ease. "You're being paranoid, Liv. I've been swamped with work, that's all. And yes, I've been consulting with your family's company, which means spending some time with Natalie. She's your sister. Shouldn't you be happy we get along?" His reasonable tone made me question my own sanity. Was I being paranoid? Oversensitive? Insecure? Maybe this was all innocent, and I was creating problems where none existed. But then came the day I stopped by his apartment unannounced, hoping to surprise him with tickets to see his favorite band that had announced a last-minute show. We'd been talking about moving in together before everything changed, and I still had a key. Maybe this thoughtful gesture would help recapture what we seemed to be losing. It was a Saturday afternoon. Jason had said he'd be working from home on a critical project deadline. I picked up his favorite coffee and pastries on the way, imagining his delighted surprise. His apartment was quiet when I entered, but not empty. A designer handbag I recognized as Natalie's sat on the entryway table. A pair of expensive heels, her size, not mine, lay discarded by the couch. And there, draped carelessly over the back of a chair, was a silk blouse I'd seen my sister wear at the last family dinner. I stood frozen, the coffee growing cold in my hands, as muffled voices and laughter drifted from the bedroom. My body moved, on autopilot, carrying me down the hallway against my will, drawn toward the confirmation of my worst fears. The bedroom door wasn't fully closed. Through the gap, I could see them tangled in the sheets of the bed where I had slept countless nights. Natalie's long, dark hair spilled across Jason's chest as he ran his fingers through it, both of them completely unaware of my presence. "When are you going to tell her?" Natalie's voice was casual, as if discussing dinner plans rather than the destruction of her sister's relationship. "Soon," Jason replied, kissing her shoulder. "It's complicated. We've been together a long time." "Mom says the longer you wait, the messier it will be," Jason sighed. "Your mother has opinions about everything," Natalie laughed. "True, but she was right about us, wasn't she? We make more sense together." The concert tickets slipped from my numb fingers, fluttering to the floor. The sound caught their attention, both heads turning toward the door in unison. For one surreal moment, we all stared at each other in silence. Me standing in the hallway, still holding their coffee, them tangled together in betrayal. "Olivia!" Jason scrambled to cover himself with the sheet. "This isn't—" "Don't!" I cut him off, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Don't say it isn't what it looks like. I'm not an idiot." Natalie made no move to cover herself, instead, sitting up slowly with the expression that seemed more annoyed than ashamed at the interruption. "You were going to find out eventually," she said with a shrug. "Maybe this is for the best." Their calm acceptance was more devastating than any hysterical apology could have been. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was deliberate, calculated, planned. "How long?" I asked, though the answer hardly mattered. "Officially, about a month," Jason admitted, unable to meet my eyes. But we've been talking for longer, Natalie added, since Mom had her little chat with him. Their surprised expressions confirmed what I'd suspected. They knew I'd overheard that conversation. They'd been watching me these past weeks, waiting for an explosion that never came, perhaps mistaking my silence for ignorance or acceptance. I placed their coffee carefully on the hallway table, my movements measured and precise despite the earthquake raging inside me. I didn't scream or throw things. I didn't collapse in tears. A strange calm had settled over me, as if I were observing the scene from a distance. "I hope you'll be very happy together," I said quietly, dropping Jason's key on top of the coffee cups. "You deserve each other." I walked out with my dignity intact, saving my tears for when I was alone in my car, parked far enough away that they wouldn't see me fall apart. As the sobs finally tore through me, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. I needed to get away, not just from Jason and Natalie, but from Seattle, from my family, from everything that had defined me until now. It was time to rebuild myself from the ground up. I drove aimlessly for hours, Seattle's familiar skyline fading in my rearview mirror as I headed north along the coast. Rain pelted my windshield, matching the storm inside me. Eventually, I found myself at a small seaside motel in Bellingham, checking in with swollen eyes and a voice raw from crying. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone as notifications piled up. 3 missed calls from Jason, 5 text messages. "Olivia, please call me. We need to talk. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant to hurt you. Please just answer so I can explain. I'm sorry. Sorry." As if that single word could mend what they'd broken. I turned off my phone and curled up on the scratchy bedspread, too exhausted to even change my clothes. Morning brought no relief. I felt hollow, scraped raw from the inside out. I couldn't avoid reality forever, though. I turned my phone back on to find more messages, not just from Jason, but from Zoe, asking if I was okay. Nothing from Natalie, nothing from my mother. I called Zoe first, my voice breaking as I told her what happened. "Oh, Liv," she breathed. "Where are you? I'll come get you." "Bellingham." "But I don't think I'm coming back, Zoe. Not right away." "What do you mean?" I surprised myself with the certainty in my voice. "I need to get away from Seattle, from all of them. But your job, your apartment, I can work remotely for a while. Aiden's been talking about expanding the studio's client base, and my lease is month to month." The plan was forming as I spoke it aloud. I could continue my design work from anywhere. Nothing was actually tying me to Seattle except memories that now felt poisoned. "Stay with me tonight," Zoe insisted. "Whatever you decide, don't do it from some random motel." I agreed, but before driving back to Seattle, I knew there was one confrontation I couldn't avoid. I called my mother. "Olivia," she answered, her tone revealing nothing. "I was wondering when we'd hear from you." "Were you?" My knuckles turned white around the phone. "Were you waiting for me to congratulate you on successfully orchestrating my breakup? Or did you expect me to just quietly disappear so the new power couple could move forward without complications?" A pause then. "Don't be so dramatic. Relationships end all the time." "You manipulated Jason into betraying me with my own sister. I merely highlighted compatibility that already existed," she replied coolly. "Natalie and Jason make more sense together. You must see that, now that the initial shock has worn off." "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why would you do this to me? Your own daughter?" I heard her sigh, imagining her sitting at her immaculate desk, viewing this conversation as an inconvenient interruption to her day. Because Natalie has always worked harder, aimed higher, she deserves a partner who matches her ambition. The utter conviction in her voice felt like a physical blow. "You've always been the soft one, Olivia. The dreamer. You'll find someone better suited to your temperament. In that moment, I understood that my mother had never truly seen me. To her, I was merely the lesser daughter, the disappointment who chose art over business, passion over pragmatism. Nothing I could achieve would ever be enough to earn her respect, not on her terms. "You're wrong about me," I whispered. "You always have been." I hung up before she could respond. That evening, sitting in Zoe's cozy apartment with a glass of wine, I reached a decision that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. "I'm moving to New York," I announced. Zoe looked up from her laptop, eyes wide. "New York? That's across the country, Liv." "Exactly. New opportunities, new connections for my art. Aiden already has contacts at design firms there." I took a deep breath. "I need a fresh start, Zoe. Somewhere no one knows me as Catherine Chen's disappointing daughter or Jason and Natalie's cautionary tale." "When?" 2 weeks. Just enough time to pack up my apartment and make arrangements with the studio. Zoe studied, my face, concern gradually giving way to understanding. "You're serious about this." "More serious than I've ever been about anything." The next morning, I went to my apartment to begin packing, half expecting to find Jason waiting at my door. Instead, I found flowers, an elaborate arrangement of roses and lilies with a card bearing Natalie's precise handwriting. "Olivia, I hope you can understand that some connections can't be denied. Jason and I never meant to hurt you. In time, I hope we can all be family again. Natalie." The presumption, the utter lack of genuine remorse, sparked something in me beyond hurt, a cold, clarifying anger. I dropped the entire arrangement into the dumpster behind my building. When I entered my apartment, memories assaulted me from every corner. Jason laughing in the kitchen as we cooked together, curled up on the sofa watching old movies, the drawing of him I'd done when we first started dating still pinned to my corkboard. I took it down, staring at the care I'd put into capturing his smile, then ripped it in half and let the pieces fall to the floor. I spent the day sorting through my belongings, deciding what was essential enough to ship across the country and what could be left behind. My artwork, my supplies, my books, yes. The furniture, dishes, the gifts from my family, no. I wanted to travel light, unburdened by reminders. When my phone rang again, I almost didn't answer, assuming it was Jason or my mother. But it was Aiden from the design studio. "I've been thinking about your move," he said without preamble. "I have a better idea than just arranging freelance work for you." "I'm listening." My college roommate, Daniel, runs a boutique design firm in Manhattan, Prism Digital. They're expanding their creative team and need someone with your illustration skills. I showed him your portfolio, and he wants to interview you. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of genuine excitement. "You're serious?" "Video interview. Next Tuesday. The job's yours if you want it, Liv. Daniel trusts my judgment." It felt like the universe was aligning to support my decision, opening doors I hadn't even known to knock on. "There's more," Aiden continued. "Another friend has a sublet available in Brooklyn. Small, but in a great neighborhood. 6-month lease to start. I told her you might be interested." By the time we hung up, I had an interview scheduled and a potential apartment. The abstract idea of moving to New York was rapidly transforming into concrete plans. The final week in Seattle passed in a blur of logistics and goodbyes. I avoided my family completely, ignoring calls from my father and texts from my mother demanding I stop this childish behavior and discuss things like adults. As if betrayal and manipulation were adult behaviors worthy of calm discussion. Jason showed up at my apartment 2 days before I was scheduled to leave. I saw him through the peephole, shifting nervously in the hallway, flowers in hand, as if flowers could fix what he'd broken. I didn't open the door. After 15 minutes, he left the flowers and a letter. I threw away both without reading. His excuses. Zoe helped me ship the last of my boxes and drove me to the airport, both of us fighting tears as we hugged goodbye at security. "This isn't forever," I promised. "Just until I find my footing again." "I know," she smiled sadly. "But promise me something? Anything. Don't let what they did change who you are. Your openness, your creativity, your trust in people, those aren't weaknesses, Liv. They're what make you special." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As my plane took off, I watched Seattle disappear beneath the clouds, the Space Needle, the mountains, the water, the city where I'd grown up, fallen in love, and had my heart shattered beyond recognition. I took out my sketchbook and began to draw, not the landscape below, but the skyline ahead, imagining New York's towers reaching into the sky like new possibilities. In my carry-on sat a small handmade card I'd created for my mother, sister, and Jason. Inside, I'd written just 3 words in my distinctive artist's script: "Watch me rise." New York greeted me with a heat wave, the August air thick and oppressive as I dragged my suitcase up 4 flights of stairs to my Brooklyn sublet. The apartment was tiny, a studio barely larger than my walk-in closet back in Seattle, with a window unit air conditioner that rattled ominously and cooled approximately 3 square feet of space. "Home, sweet home," I muttered, surveying the space that would be mine for the next 6 months. The furniture was sparse but functional: a futon sofa that converted to a bed, a wobbly dining table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a desk tucked into a corner by the window. The kitchen consisted of a mini fridge, a 2-burner stove, and about 18 inches of counter space. The bathroom was so small I had to step into the shower to close the door. I unpacked the few clothes I'd brought, arranged my art supplies on the desk, and taped a single photo to the wall. Me and Zoe laughing at Ocean Beach last summer, before my world imploded. No family photos, no reminders of Jason. This space would be uncontaminated by my past. Reality set in quickly. My savings, which had seemed adequate in Seattle, evaporated at alarming speed in New York. Everything cost more: groceries, transportation, even laundry at the coin-operated machines in the basement. The 6-month sublet had required first and last month's rent plus a security deposit, depleting most of my emergency fund. My interview with Prism Digital went well. Daniel was impressed with my portfolio and offered me the position on the spot, but the salary was modest by New York standards and the job wouldn't start for 3 weeks. Aiden had connected me with some freelance clients to bridge the gap, but payment terms meant I wouldn't see that money for at least 30 days. "You have 21 days, I told my reflection in the tiny bathroom mirror one morning, "to make this work before you have to start living on credit cards." To save money, I survived on instant ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I walked instead of taking the subway when possible, despite the punishing heat. I scoured Facebook Marketplace for affordable furniture and decor, slowly making the space feel more like mine. A colorful secondhand rug, a floor lamp with a paper shade that cast warm light, thrifted curtains to replace the dingy blinds. My first weekend, I forced myself to explore my neighborhood, a rapidly gentrifying area of Bushwick where industrial buildings were being converted into art studios and craft breweries. I discovered a coffee shop with decent Wi-Fi where I could work without draining my data plan, a laundromat with machines that didn't eat quarters, and a community garden where locals gathered on weekends. Despite my tight budget, I splurged on art supplies, setting up a small studio space in the corner of my apartment. When anxiety about money or lingering heartache threatened to overwhelm me, I channeled it into art, creating a series of digital illustrations about metamorphosis and rebirth that helped process my emotions while building my portfolio. Loneliness was my constant companion. In Seattle, I'd had friends, routines, favorite places. Here, I was anonymous, just another face in the crowd. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Zoe about some odd sight or funny encounter, only to remember the 3-hour time difference made spontaneous communication difficult. Nights were the hardest. The city never truly went dark or quiet, light and sound seeping through my windows at all hours. I'd lie awake on my uncomfortable futon, replaying memories I was trying to escape. Jason's betrayal, Natalie's smug expression, my mother's cold dismissal of my worth. This was a mistake, I whispered into the darkness 2 weeks after arriving, as sirens wailed outside, and the couple in the next apartment argued loudly about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. I should have stayed in Seattle. I should have fought. But fought for what? A man who had chosen my sister? A family that had never valued me? A community where I'd forever be pitied as the woman who wasn't enough? No, I'd made the right choice. This struggle was the price of freedom, of reinvention. The next morning, I received a text from my father, the first contact from my family since I'd left. Olivia, your mother is concerned about your sudden move. So am I. Please call when you can. We want to make sure you're all right. I didn't respond. My father had stood by silently while my mother orchestrated my heartbreak. His belated concern felt like too little, too late. A week later, my sister texted, "Mom's upset you've ignored." Dad's messages. Jason and I announced our engagement last night. We're planning a spring wedding. Hope you can set aside your feelings by then. Family should be family. The audacity was breathtaking. I blocked her number without responding, then curled up on my futon and sobbed until I had no tears left. Engaged. After barely 2 months together officially, though their betrayal had been in motion much longer. My mother must be ecstatic, her machinations complete. When my crying jag ended, I sat at my desk and channeled my hurt into a searing illustration. A woman shedding her skin like a snake, leaving behind the husk of her former self to emerge stronger, more vibrant. I posted it to my professional Instagram with the caption, "Rebirth is rarely painless. New beginnings, Artist." The piece resonated far beyond my small following, gaining hundreds of likes and shares overnight. A popular art blog featured it, praising its raw emotional honesty and technical precision. My follower count tripled in a week. This unexpected validation fueled me. I expanded the concept into a series, each piece exploring aspects of recovery and transformation. By the time I started at Prism Digital, I'd built significant buzz around my personal work. My first day at Prism was overwhelming. The office occupied the entire top floor of a converted warehouse in Chelsea with exposed brick walls, enormous windows, and an open floor plan designed to foster collaboration. Sleek computers, drawing tablets, and creative workstations filled the space, along with comfortable lounges for casual meetings. Daniel greeted me warmly, introducing me to the team of 20 designers, developers, and account managers. Everyone seemed impossibly cool and confident, wearing stylish clothes I couldn't afford, discussing clients and projects I'd never heard of, referring to industry insiders by first names. "Don't be intimidated," Daniel said, noticing my wide eyes as we toured the space. "Everyone starts somewhere. Aiden says you're exceptional and he doesn't give praise lightly." My workspace was a dream, a large desk with a high-end desktop computer, professional drawing tablet, and adjustable chair all positioned near a window with a view of the Manhattan skyline. After my cramped apartment setup, it felt luxurious. "We're throwing you into the deep end," Daniel warned, dropping a folder on my desk. "The Meridian Athletic campaign needs fresh concepts by Friday. Their previous designer quit mid-project, and they're not happy with what they've seen so far." I opened the folder to find a brief for a major athletic wear brand seeking to reposition itself in the luxury market while maintaining its appeal to serious athletes. "Any questions?" Daniel asked. I had about 1,000, but only one mattered. What makes Meridian different from other athletic brands? Daniel smiled. That's exactly the right question. Figure that out, and you're halfway to a concept that works. The pressure was intense. As the newest team member, I felt I had everything to prove and no margin for error. I stayed late every night that first week, researching the brand, sketching, concepts, teaching myself the team's workflow systems, and trying to absorb the company culture. My colleagues were talented but intimidating, graduates of prestigious design schools, veterans of famous agencies, winners of industry awards. I felt like an imposter, waiting to be exposed as the small-time Seattle artist who didn't belong. My third week at Prism, I overheard two senior designers discussing my Meridian concepts in the break room. "She's got a fresh perspective," one said. "Not the obvious approach." "Too conceptual," the other replied. "Clients like Meridian want safe. They'll never go for it." I modified my designs that night, creating safer alternatives that made me want to cry with their blandness. When I presented both versions to Daniel the next day, he flipped through them silently. "These new ones?" he said finally, pointing to my safe designs. "Where did these come from?" I explained what I'd overheard. Daniel sighed. "Olivia, I hired you because your portfolio showed an artist who wasn't afraid to take risks. These safe designs? Anyone could create these. But these?" He tapped my original concepts. "These have a point of view. If I wanted safe, I'd have hired safe. But what if the client hates them? Then we learn and adjust. But we never start from a place of fear." It was a lesson that resonated beyond design, striking at the heart of how I'd been living since arriving in New York. Cautiously, fearfully, trying to avoid another failure, another rejection. That evening, I returned to my apartment and looked at the cramped space with fresh eyes. I'd been so focused on what it lacked compared to my Seattle home that I'd missed what it represented: independence, courage, possibility. I unpacked the last box I'd been avoiding, the one containing personal mementos I couldn't bear to leave behind, but had been too raw to display. My grandmother's hand-painted tea set, the award certificate from my first art competition, a small sketchbook filled with ideas and dreams I'd been too intimidated to pursue in Seattle. As I placed these treasures around my tiny apartment, I made a decision. I would stop apologizing for taking up space in New York, stop feeling like an imposter at Prism, stop defining myself by my family's betrayal. This struggle wasn't a sign I'd made a mistake. It was the necessary fire that would forge me into something stronger. The next morning, I woke before dawn and set up my easel by the window, capturing the city as it came alive with the rising sun. For the first time since arriving, I felt a sense of belonging, not because New York had finally accepted me, but because I had finally accepted myself, struggles, doubts, and all. My phone pinged with a text from Daniel. "Meridian loved your original concepts. Meeting tomorrow to discuss next steps. This is big, Olivia. Well done." I smiled at my reflection in the window, the city lights behind me like stars aligning at last. "Watch me rise," I whispered to myself. Just watch me. 3 months into my New York life, things were looking up. The Meridian campaign had launched to positive industry buzz, earning me recognition within Prism and boosting my confidence. My tiny apartment had transformed from a blank canvas into a personal haven, filled with art, color, and found treasures from weekend flea market expeditions. I'd even made a few friends, colleagues who invited me to happy hours, a fellow artist I'd met at the local coffee shop, my elderly neighbor who brought me homemade pierogi and stories from 7 decades of New York living. But my finances remained precarious. New York's cost of living devoured my salary, leaving little room for savings or emergencies. And with winter approaching, my building's ancient heating system proved woefully inadequate, forcing me to layer sweaters and sleep under 3 blankets. You need a roommate situation, advised Layla, a graphic designer at Prism, as we huddled over coffees during our lunch break. My friend's place in Williamsburg has an opening next month. 4-bedroom, much nicer than where you are now, and the rent would be about the same. I hesitated. After months of hard-won independence, the idea of sharing space again felt like a step backward. But my practical side couldn't ignore the potential benefits. Better neighborhood, reliable heating, maybe even money left over for occasional luxuries like takeout food that wasn't ramen. I'll think about it, I promised Layla. That afternoon, Daniel called me into his office. I assumed it was about the pharmaceutical campaign I'd been designing, but his expression suggested something more serious. "Close the door, Olivia," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. Was I being fired? Had I unknowingly violated some company policy? I'd been careful to meet every deadline, incorporate all client feedback, contribute positively to team discussions. "I received an interesting call this morning," Daniel continued, studying my face. "From Ethan Blackwood." The name wasn't familiar. I waited, trying not to show my confusion. Ethan is the creative director at Vertex Innovation. They're a tech startup specializing in augmented reality applications for retail and marketing. Daniel leaned forward. "He saw your Meridian campaign and your personal series on transformation. He was impressed." I relaxed slightly. Not being fired then. Vertex is developing a revolutionary AR platform that lets consumers visualize products in real-world settings before purchasing. They need a lead visual designer who understands both digital art and emotional storytelling. Daniel paused. "Ethan wants to meet you." "That's flattering," I said carefully. "But I'm committed to Prism. You took a chance on me when I needed it most." Daniel smiled. "I appreciate your loyalty, but this isn't about you leaving Prism. Vertex wants to partner with us on this platform, and they specifically requested you as the designer liaison. It would mean dividing your time between our office and theirs, working directly with their development team while still being part of Prism." "Oh!" The opportunity seemed too good to be true. "Why me? I'm the newest person here." "Because your work has a unique perspective that resonates with their vision. Your Rebirth series demonstrated exactly the emotional impact they want their platform to create." Daniel handed me a business card. "Ethan's expecting your call. This could be huge for your career, Olivia, and for Prism." I left Daniel's office in a daze, clutching Ethan Blackwood's card like a golden ticket. This opportunity could solve my financial problems while advancing my career in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Still, caution tempered my excitement. Every too-good-to-be-true opportunity in Seattle had come with hidden costs. I called Ethan. That evening from my apartment, pacing the small space as I introduced myself. "Olivia Chen," he answered immediately. "I was hoping you'd call today. Your work on Meridian was exceptional. Clean, distinctive, emotionally resonant. Exactly what Vertex needs." His voice was warm but professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place, maybe Boston mixed with something European. "Thank you," I replied. "But I'm still learning what makes New York design different from Seattle. I'm not sure I'm qualified for something this innovative." That perspective, seeing things from outside the New York bubble, is precisely why we want you, Ethan explained. "Our platform needs to resonate nationally, not just with Manhattan creatives. Your Seattle background is an asset, not a liability." We talked for almost an hour, Ethan outlining Vertex's vision, while I asked increasingly detailed questions about the platform's capabilities and design challenges. By the time we hung up, we'd scheduled a meeting for the following week, and I felt a spark of genuine excitement that had nothing to do with money or career advancement. This project was creatively fascinating. The Vertex office occupied 3 floors of a sleek glass building in the Flatiron district. all polished concrete floors, reclaimed wood accents, and walls of windows offering panoramic city views. Unlike Prism's creative chaos, Vertex was minimalist and precise, every element thoughtfully designed, every space serving a clear purpose. Ethan met me in the lobby. He wasn't what I expected from a tech creative director. No designer glasses or carefully curated casual outfit. Instead, he wore a simple gray sweater over a white button-down, dark jeans, and worn leather boots. Tall with broad shoulders, he had the solid build of someone who spent time outdoors rather than hunched over computers. His dark hair was cut short, showing a few strands of silver at the temples, despite his appearing to be only in his mid-30s. "Olivia, welcome to Vertex," he said, extending his hand. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes, an unusual blue-gray that reminded me of the Pacific Northwest sky before a storm. "Thank you for the invitation," I replied, suddenly conscious of my carefully assembled professional New York designer outfit that had seemed sophisticated in my apartment, but now felt contrived. Ethan gave me a comprehensive tour, introducing me to developers, marketing specialists, and the small existing design team. Unlike the cool assessment I'd grown accustomed to at Prism, the Vertex team was warmly enthusiastic, several members mentioning specific elements of my work they'd admired. "Your shedding skin piece? Brilliant metaphor, stunning execution," gushed a UX designer named Maya. "I've got it as my phone background." In a large conference room, Ethan demonstrated the AR platform. I watched in amazement as he used a tablet to place virtual furniture in the physical space, adjusting colors, materials, and dimensions in real time. The technology was impressive, but the interface was clunky, the visual elements generic. "This is where you come in," Ethan explained, setting down the tablet. "The technology works, but the experience lacks emotional resonance. Users need to feel something when they interact with virtual products. Excitement, comfort, aspiration. Your designs would transform this from a useful tool into a meaningful experience." The meeting extended well past its scheduled hour as we brainstormed possibilities. Ethan was an attentive listener, building on my ideas rather than imposing his own vision. Unlike Jason, who had often nodded politely at my creative suggestions before explaining why they wouldn't work, Ethan engaged with genuine interest, challenging assumptions and pushing concepts further. "You're thinking three-dimensionally already," he noted, as I sketched interface elements that seemed to float at different depths. "Most designers struggle with that transition from flat design." "My father was an architect," I explained without thinking. "I grew up surrounded by blueprints and models. It was the first personal detail I'd shared, and I immediately regretted it. I'd been careful to keep my past compartmentalized, separate from my new New York life." But Ethan simply nodded. "That explains your intuitive understanding of space. My grandfather was a shipbuilder. I think that's why I'm obsessed with how things fit together." By the end of the meeting, the partnership was confirmed. I would split my time between Prism and Vertex, serving as the creative bridge between the companies. The arrangement included a substantial salary increase that would solve my financial worries and allow me to find a better apartment. As Ethan walked me to the elevator, he hesitated. "This is unorthodox, but would you be interested in continuing our discussion over dinner? There's a great Ethiopian place around the corner. The design team goes there sometimes to break through creative blocks. Something about the communal eating experience seems to spark ideas." My defenses immediately activated. Was this a date disguised as a business dinner? Another man seeing me as an opportunity rather than a professional equal? Ethan must have read my expression. "Strictly professional," he clarified. "I should have been clearer. I'm fascinated by your approach to visual storytelling, and I have about 50 more questions about how we can apply it to the platform. But we can definitely save that for working hours if you prefer." There was no pressure in his tone, no suggestion that my answer would affect our professional arrangement. just genuine interest in my creative perspective. Ethiopian sounds great, I decided. I have questions about the platform's animation capabilities that we didn't get to. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with rich colors and delicious smells. As promised, our conversation remained focused on the project, though I found myself relaxing as we shared a large platter of spiced dishes and injera bread. "So what brought you to New York?" Ethan asked as we finished our meal. Daniel mentioned, "You're relatively new to the city." I tensed, my standard vague answer ready. Career opportunity, change of scenery, the usual. But something about Ethan's straightforward manner made the practiced lines feel false. Not that I owed him my story, but I was tired of pretending my past didn't exist. "I needed a fresh start," I said finally. "Family complications, relationship ended badly, classic running away to New York story." Ethan nodded, not pressing for details. "I came here running too, 8 years ago. London finance. I was on track to partner at my father's firm and suddenly couldn't breathe every time I put on a suit." "What changed?" "My brother died," he said simply. "Rock climbing accident. He was the artist, the risk taker. I was the practical one following the expected path." Ethan looked out the restaurant window at the New York street scene. "His death showed me how quickly it can all end, how little time we have to become who we're meant to be." The unexpected vulnerability in his story resonated deeply. "I'm sorry about your brother," I said softly. "Thank you." He smiled slightly. "The point is, running away sometimes leads exactly where you need to go. New York has a way of either crushing you or forcing you to become more authentically yourself." "I'm discovering that," I admitted. As we parted outside the restaurant, Ethan shook my hand. "I'm looking forward to working with you, Olivia. I think this partnership is going to create something extraordinary." Walking to the subway, I realized I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine enthusiasm for the future, not just determination to survive it. The Vertex project wasn't just a financial lifeline, it was a creative challenge that ignited my passion and a professional connection based on mutual respect. For the first time since arriving in New York, I felt like I wasn't just rebuilding what I'd lost in Seattle. I was creating something entirely new, potentially better, than what had been taken from me. Winter in New York was brutal. Nothing like Seattle's mild, rainy season. Snow piled in dirty heaps along sidewalks, wind cut through layers of clothing, and the city turned harsh and unforgiving. But as the external world grew colder, my internal landscape began to thaw. The Vertex project consumed my creative energy, in the best possible way. 3 days a week, I worked from their Flatiron office, collaborating with developers and UX designers to transform their augmented reality platform from functional to magical. The other 2 days, I handled my regular Prism clients, bringing fresh insights gained from the cutting-edge technology at Vertex. "You've changed," Daniel remarked during our monthly review session at Prism. "Your work was always technically strong, but now there's a confidence, a distinctive voice emerging." I smiled, recognizing the truth in his observation. New York is teaching me to speak up or get trampled. With my increased salary, I found a better apartment in a pre-war building in Greenpoint, still small by Seattle standards, but with functional heating, original hardwood floors, and tall windows that flooded the space with morning light. I splurged on a real bed to replace the futon and a professional drawing table positioned to capture the northern exposure artists prized. My collaboration with Ethan evolved into an easy partnership built on mutual respect. Unlike Jason, who had often made me feel I needed to downplay my abilities to avoid threatening him, Ethan seemed genuinely delighted when I challenged his ideas or proposed unexpected solutions. We developed a creative shorthand, sometimes finishing each other's sentences during team presentations. "The Chen Blackwood mind meld is getting scary," Maya from the UX team commented, after we simultaneously suggested the same interface innovation. Laughed it off. But privately, I treasured this professional connection built on intellectual equality rather than romantic entanglement. The wounds from Jason's betrayal were still tender enough that I kept a careful boundary around my heart, focusing on rebuilding my career and sense of self. Winter gave way to spring, marking 6 months since my escape from Seattle. I celebrated by joining a community art studio space where I could work on larger personal pieces that my apartment couldn't accommodate. The membership fee stretched my budget, but the creative freedom and community of fellow artists proved invaluable. My Rebirth series expanded, evolving from digital illustrations to mixed media works combining traditional techniques with technology. Using skills developed at Vertex, I incorporated augmented reality elements into physical paintings, creating pieces that revealed hidden layers when viewed through a smartphone app. The series caught the attention of a small gallery in Chelsea, leading to my inclusion in a group show featuring emerging artists. Standing at the opening reception, watching strangers engage with my work, tilting their phones to reveal the digital elements beneath the painted surface, I felt a surge of vindication. This was why I'd left Seattle, not just to escape betrayal, but to discover what I could become without the weight of others' limited expectations. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Wish I could be there tonight. So proud of you, Liv. Send pics of your fancy art crowd." Our friendship had survived the distance, weekly video calls keeping us connected despite the miles and time zones. Through Zoe, I received occasional updates about Seattle, always carefully filtered to avoid mentioning my family or Jason unless I specifically asked. But that night, riding high on the success of the gallery opening, I broke my own rule and asked, "Have you heard anything about Jason and Natalie?" Zoe hesitated on the screen, clearly weighing how much to share. "Are you sure you want to know?" I'm sure. And I was. For the first time, I felt strong enough to hear about them without crumbling. They got married last month. Small ceremony at your parents' country club. Jason's startup was acquired by a larger tech company. He's in some executive role now. Zoe paused. "People talk, Liv. Word is they're not as happy as they pretend to be on Instagram." I waited for the pain, the jealousy, the sense of injustice. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, as if hearing about characters in a movie I'd walked out of halfway through. "Good to know," I said simply. "But enough about them. Let me show you my new paintings." That conversation marked a turning point. I'd feared knowledge of their married life would reopen wounds, but instead, it confirmed my healing. Their choices no longer defined me or determined my happiness. As spring warmed into summer, the Vertex platform neared its beta launch. Ethan and I worked increasingly long hours, perfecting the visual experience and user interface. Our professional rapport deepened into friendship. Lunches evolved into conversations that stretched beyond work, revealing shared interests in obscure films, hiking, and architectural history. "We're hosting a weekend hackathon to stress test the platform before launch," Ethan announced one evening as we reviewed final UI adjustments. "Teams working around the clock, plenty of caffeine and pizza. You in?" The old Olivia would have hesitated, worried about appearing too eager or overcommitted. The new Olivia simply nodded. Wouldn't miss it. The hackathon transformed the Vertex office into a creative battlefield. Developers huddled over keyboards, designers sketching feverishly, marketing specialists crafting launch strategies. I worked alongside my team for 36 exhilarating hours, catching brief naps on office couches when exhaustion demanded it. During one such break at 3 a.m., I awoke to find Ethan placing his jacket over me as a makeshift blanket, his expression softening when he realized I was awake. "Sorry," he whispered. "You looked cold." Something shifted between us in that moment, a boundary blurring, a possibility emerging. But neither of us acknowledged it, returning instead to the safe territory of work and deadlines. The platform launched to enthusiastic industry reception, with technology blogs praising its innovative interface and emotional resonance. Vertex has created not just a tool, but an experience, wrote one influential reviewer, specifically highlighting the visual design. The subtle animations and color psychology create a sense of possibility and transformation as users interact with virtual objects. My contributions earned me a substantial bonus and an offer to join Vertex full-time as creative director. After careful consideration and lengthy discussions with Daniel, I arranged a compromise. I would lead Vertex's creative team while maintaining a consulting relationship with Prism for select clients. "They're lucky to have you," Daniel said when I shared my decision. "But so are we. Don't be a stranger." My professional life was thriving beyond my most optimistic expectations, but my personal transformation proved even more significant. Yarpur-e, scared, hurt woman who had fled Seattle now seemed like a distant relative, someone I remembered with compassion but no longer fully recognized. The new Olivia spoke up in meetings without apologizing first. She negotiated her salary confidently instead of accepting the first offer. She maintained boundaries with clients and colleagues, no longer equating people-pleasing with worthiness. Most importantly, she created art that reflected her authentic vision rather than adapting to others' expectations. I marked the one-year anniversary of my arrival in New York by getting my first tattoo, a small phoenix on my inner wrist, a personal reminder of rising from the ashes of betrayal. That same week, I opened my first solo exhibition at the Chelsea Gallery, featuring an expanded collection of my augmented reality paintings. The show, titled Visible, Invisible, explored themes of perception versus reality, what lies beneath the surface, and the transformative power of seeing beyond appearances. Each piece contained hidden digital elements that could only be accessed through technology, creating a layered experience that mirrored my journey from surface-level relationships to deeper understanding of myself. Opening night exceeded all expectations, with art critics, gallery owners, and design professionals filling the space. Several pieces sold before the evening ended, including the centerpiece, a large-scale painting of a woman shedding multiple translucent layers, with each layer revealing a different digital landscape when viewed through the companion app. "It's extraordinary," said Ethan, who had arrived with flowers and genuine pride in his eyes. "The way you've merged traditional and digital media creates an experience that's both intimate and universal." He'd been supportive of my art from the beginning, but always respectful of the boundary I maintained between my professional and personal lives. That night, surrounded by tangible evidence of my creative evolution, the boundary felt increasingly arbitrary. "Thank you for coming," I said, accepting the flowers. "It means a lot to have someone here who knew me at the beginning of this journey." "I wouldn't have missed it," he replied, then hesitated. "I have something to ask you, but not here. Maybe dinner next week, when the exhibition madness settles down." Before I could respond, we were interrupted by the gallery owner introducing me to a prominent collector interested in commissioning work. By the time I finished the conversation, Ethan had been pulled into another group, the moment suspended between us. Later that night, after the last guest departed and I stood alone in the gallery surrounded by my creations, my phone chimed with a text from my mother, the first direct contact in over a year. "Your father saw an article about your exhibition in the Times. Apparently you found some success with your art after all. Perhaps next time you're in Seattle you might find time to visit. Natalie and Jason have purchased a house in our neighborhood." The message landed differently than it would have a year ago. Instead of pain or anger, I felt only a calm certainty that I was exactly where I belonged, becoming exactly who I was meant to be. I didn't respond to the text, choosing instead to send a message to Ethan. "Dinner next week sounds perfect. I have something to ask you too." Walking home through the warm summer night, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced since before that fateful Sunday dinner in Seattle. Genuine hope for the future, uncolored by fear or doubt. Not because everything was perfect or resolved, but because I had finally learned to trust my own strength. Whatever came next, professionally, personally, artistically, I would face it as this new version of myself. Olivia Chen, Phoenix Risen, no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had created in its place. Dinner with Ethan took place at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of authentic place tourists never find. The owner, Marco, greeted Ethan by name and led us to a corner table. "Marco's been feeding me since my broke days in New York," Ethan explained. "When I couldn't afford anything but dollar pizza, he'd accidentally make too much pasta and insist I help him avoid waste." "You were broke?" I asked, surprised. "I assumed you came from London with a finance safety net." Ethan laughed. "I walked away from everything. The job, the connections, the trust fund. My father made it clear that leaving the firm meant leaving the family fortune too." "That must have been terrifying," I said. "Absolutely. Also completely necessary." He looked at me thoughtfully. "But you understand that, don't you? Walking away from the expected path?" I nodded. "Though in my case, the path walked away from me first." Over dinner, Ethan revealed his reason for inviting me. "Vertex is expanding to San Francisco. I've been asked to establish the West Coast. Operation, a 6-month assignment, potentially longer." My stomach tightened. "That's a fantastic opportunity." "It is," he agreed, "but not one I want to pursue alone." He took a deep breath. "I'd like you to consider coming with me as Vertex's West Coast creative director." The offer caught me completely off guard. Move to San Francisco? Leave New York just as I was finding my footing? "That's unexpected," I said honestly. "I've just started feeling settled here." "I know, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't think it was the right move professionally. The tech industry there is hungry for your kind of creative vision." He made compelling points, but something felt unresolved between us. "Can I ask something personal?" I ventured. "Are you asking me to come to San Francisco only because of our working relationship? Or is there something else factoring into this?" Ethan's expression softened. "That's what I admire about you, cutting straight to the heart of things." He leaned forward. "Yes, I'm asking because you're the best creative director for this project. But yes, there's something else too." My heart quickened as he continued. "I care about you, Olivia, more than as a colleague or friend. I've felt it developing for months, but I've been careful about boundaries, especially knowing you came to New York healing from something significant." He paused. "I'm not asking you to move for me. I'm asking you to consider if San Francisco might be the right next step for you, professionally and personally. If it is, I'd like to explore what might be possible between us. If it's not, I respect that completely." His honesty was refreshing. No manipulation, no pressure, just truth offered with respect for my autonomy. How different from the deception I'd experienced in Seattle. "That's what I wanted to ask you too," I admitted. "About us. About whether you felt this connection or if I was imagining it." Relief washed over his features. "Definitely not imagining it." Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully evaluated the San Francisco opportunity. I called Zoe for advice. "He sounds nothing like Jason," she observed. "The way he presented this, giving you space to make your own decision without manipulation, that shows real respect." "It does," I agreed. "But am I crazy to consider another cross-country move so soon?" The Olivia I knew in Seattle would have said no immediately. "Too afraid of the risk," Zoe replied. "But the New York Olivia I've watched emerge this past year? She makes choices based on possibility, not fear." Her words resonated. I had survived starting over once with nothing but determination and talent. I had built a life I was proud of. Whatever path I chose now would be from a position of strength, not desperation. I accepted Vertex's offer. We moved to San Francisco. In September, not together, but coordinated. I found an apartment in the Mission District, Ethan in nearby Hayes Valley. The separate spaces gave us room to establish individual lives while our relationship deepened. The San Francisco art scene welcomed my augmented reality work enthusiastically. My professional reputation grew as Vertex's West Coast launch exceeded projections. My relationship with Ethan evolved naturally, without the pressure or game-playing I'd experienced with Jason. We built a foundation of honest communication and mutual support. 2 years into our San Francisco life, with our careers flourishing and our relationship solid, Ethan proposed during a weekend trip to Big Sur, not with an elaborate production, but during a quiet moment watching the sunset over the Pacific. "I don't want to possess you or complete you," he said. "I want to continue growing alongside you, building something meaningful together. Partners in the truest sense." My answer was an immediate, certain yes. This wasn't a decision made from desperation or fear of being alone, but from a place of clarity about who we were together and separately. Our first year of marriage coincided with explosive growth for Vertex. When a global technology conglomerate made an acquisition offer that included substantial creative autonomy guarantees, we carefully considered the opportunity together. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, spreading the proposal documents across our dining table. "It's a generous offer, both financially and structurally." The acquisition closed 3 months later. Ethan became Chief Innovation Officer for the conglomerate's entire AR division, while I accepted a newly created position as Director of Creative Experience. 5 years after leaving Seattle, we had built a life that exceeded my wildest expectations. Professionally successful, personally fulfilling, and completely of our own design. It was then that the invitation arrived, an embossed card requesting our presence at a technology industry gala in Seattle, honoring pioneers in augmented reality development. As one of the featured honorees, Ethan's attendance was expected. "We don't have to go," Ethan said, watching my face as I read the invitation. I considered his offer. "No, I think it's time. Seattle was my home for 26 years. I've avoided it long enough." The decision to return wasn't about confrontation. It was about acknowledging that Seattle was part of my story, a chapter closed but not erased, a place that no longer held power over my happiness. We flew to Seattle on a clear spring day. The city looked both familiar and foreign, unchanged in its essential geography, but different through my transformed perspective. According to filtered updates from my father and Zoe, my parents had divorced, and Natalie and Jason's marriage had devolved into a barely disguised arrangement of convenience, held together by mutual ambition and my mother's refusal to acknowledge another failure. The gala was held at the Art Museum, an ironic venue given my mother's dismissal of my artistic ambitions. As we entered the grand hall, I felt eyes turning toward us. "Olivia." My mother's voice was exactly as I remembered, controlled, precise, with underlying notes of judgment. "What a surprise to see you back in Seattle." I turned to face her. "Mother." "Not a complete surprise, I imagine, since Ethan is receiving an award tonight." Her eyes flickered with something, recognition perhaps, or calculation as she processed the connection. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood's contributions to augmented reality are quite remarkable. I wasn't aware you were acquainted." "More than acquainted," I said, reaching for Ethan as he finished his own conversation nearby. "Mother, this is my husband, Ethan Blackwood." My mother's carefully maintained composure slipped momentarily. "Husband? I wasn't aware you had remarried, Olivia." "Not remarried," I corrected gently. "Just married. 5 years ago." Natalie joined our circle, stopping abruptly as she recognized me. "Olivia, you're here." I introduced her to Ethan, who shook her hand with perfect courtesy. "Pleasure to meet you. Your sister speaks highly of your business acumen." It wasn't exactly true. I rarely discussed my family with Ethan, but the gracious lie established a tone of civilized interaction rather than dramatic confrontation. "Congratulations on your award, Mr. Blackwood," Natalie replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Your work with augmented reality is transforming the industry." "Thank you, but it's been a collaborative effort," Ethan replied smoothly. Olivia's creative direction has been instrumental to Vertex's success. Her ability to merge artistic vision with technological innovation is unparalleled. My mother and sister exchanged a glance, processing this revelation. The artistic daughter they had dismissed had become a recognized innovator in a field they respected. "The Chen women have always had a certain creative flair," my mother offered, attempting to retroactively claim credit for my success. "Perhaps you've seen Natalie's interior design work for the Davis Technology headquarters." I smiled politely, recognizing my mother's familiar pattern of elevating Natalie while minimizing me. But the old sting was absent. Her opinion no longer defined my worth. As if summoned, Jason appeared at Natalie's side, his expression shifting from professional charm to shock when he saw me. He had changed physically, slightly heavier, with signs of stress around his eyes and a tightness to his smile. "Olivia," he managed, his voice betraying his surprise. "It's been a long time." "It has," I agreed easily. "Jason, this is my husband, Ethan Blackwood, founder of Vertex Innovation and tonight's honoree for breakthrough applications in augmented reality." Jason shook Ethan's hand, visibly processing the magnitude of who stood before him both professionally and personally. "Vertex, yes, of course. Remarkable work." "Thank you," Ethan replied. "Though, as I was just telling your wife, much of that success belongs to Olivia. Her creative direction has transformed how users engage with our technology. The Art Institute of Chicago is featuring her augmented reality installations next season. The mention of my artistic success in the same breath as major tech innovation created a moment of exquisite discomfort for my former family." Jason looked between Ethan and me with dawning comprehension, perhaps finally understanding exactly what he had discarded. "I should find my father," I said after a moment of weighted silence. "It was interesting seeing you all." As Ethan and I moved away, he squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I considered the question seriously. "Surprisingly, yes. They seem smaller somehow." "Not smaller," Ethan corrected gently. "Just no longer looming. Larger than life in your story." When Ethan took the stage to accept his honor, he spoke eloquently about technology's potential to connect rather than isolate, to enhance human experience rather than replace it. "And none of this would be possible without my partner in every sense," he concluded, smiling toward me in the audience. "Olivia Chen Blackwood, whose artistic vision reminds us all that technology without humanity is just code. Thank you for showing all of us how to see beyond surfaces to the deeper reality beneath." His words, spoken to a room full of industry leaders who now nodded in recognition of my contribution, felt like the final piece of a journey that had begun with overheard whispers in my parents' kitchen years ago. Later that night, back in our hotel room overlooking the city where my heart had once been broken, I stood by the window watching Seattle's familiar skyline. Ethan joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "Any regrets about coming back?" he asked. I considered the evening, the initial awkwardness, the subtle power shifts, the realization that my former family now existed as characters in a story rather than forces shaping my present. "None," I said with certainty. Seeing them tonight finally closed that chapter completely. They made choices based on their values, ambition, status, appearances. I've made choices based on mine: authenticity, mutual respect, creative fulfillment. I turned in his arms to face him. Their choices led them to lives that look impressive from the outside, but seem hollow within. Ours led us here, to partnership that strengthens rather than diminishes who we are individually. As our plane lifted off the following morning, Seattle, receding beneath us, I felt no lingering attachment to what I'd lost there, only gratitude for the painful awakening that had forced me to find my true path. My mother had convinced my boyfriend to marry my sister, believing she was engineering optimal outcomes based on her limited understanding of success. Instead, she had inadvertently set me free to discover what genuine partnership could be. Not two people clinging to each other from insecurity or ambition, but two whole individuals choosing to build something meaningful together, each making the other stronger through respect, honesty, and love. Sometimes, I realized as the plane banked toward home, the greatest gift your enemies can give you is showing you exactly what you don't want, clearing the path to what you truly deserve. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.